The real problem is that we're reaching possible tipping points. And actually, the scientists don't want us to go there because they're not sure what nature will do. Nature is our friend at the moment. It's absorbing. The oceans are absorbing the carbon. The forests are absorbing the carbon. They're helping us. But if we put nature out of sync, which we're doing on these boundaries, then we might, see very real tipping points. The coral reefs might disappear. Permafrost, and there's a lot of it around the Arctic, etc., could melt and throw up not just carbon, but methane, which is more lethal in the short term.
So what's the answer to this? How do we reverse the most worrying trends that you've identified?
We can all go back to the safe zone. And that is really the path forward that this planetary health check is showing us. We need to change the way in which we approach our electricity, our land use, protect what is already there with everything that indigenous communities are protecting. For example, indigenous communities protect 80% of the world's biodiversity despite being 5% of the global population.
If I could just say, we have a success story about these planetary boundaries, the ozone layer. I mean, I well remember in the 80s when we learned about the opening up of the ozone layer, and we thought we were going to be fried. And then we got rid of the chemicals that were forming it.
Madam President, what is the economic imperative for action on this today?
There's a huge economic imperative because we are literally talking about whether we have a livable future, for goodness sake. At the moment, the B team of business leaders that I belong to, I'm not a businesswoman, I think I'm their moral conscience, but they estimate that we spend about $1.8 trillion a year on what is harming us. Subsidies for fossil fuel and bad land management. If we can switch a very significant proportion of that money, we can incentivize moving, especially developing countries, to affordable, accessible, clean energy. The fossil fuel lobby is fighting hard to slow it down, but it's happening. Madam
President, you stepped down as Ireland's president before Ms. Bastida was born. Talk me through, if you would, Ms. Bastida, how a multi-generational approach will help us navigate this.
Now more than ever, it is imperative that when leaders are making decisions, they're thinking of how those decisions will affect generations to come. And coming from an indigenous background, there's youth and elder circles where youth and elders are always talking about what our creation stories are so that we can also keep moving and conserving these traditions and this cultural knowledge and this ancient wisdom.
This is a challenge for governments, for policymakers, but also for populations, for voters. How do you persuade populations everywhere that the sacrifices we all have to make for a healthy planet are worth the cost?
Helping nature is the biggest investment, if you want to see it in economic terms, that we could ever make, because we come from the earth. We are alive because of all of the earth systems working together for us. So I really want the world to understand the perspective that when we say we're fighting for Mother Earth, we're fighting for the future.
In a few words, please, how optimistic are you?
I've learned from Archbishop Tutu, I'm a prisoner of hope. We will work to make sure that this health check, which is quite alarming, also has a positive story of how we get there.
We owe it to our children, and we owe it to future generations. So hope is our responsibility. Hope, optimism is as well our responsibility.